The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Copper Creek, painting the wooden storefronts in hues of amber and gold. Samuel Hayworth sat astride his chestnut mare, his weathered face partially hidden beneath the wide brim of his Stetson, as he surveyed the frontier town he hadn't visited in nearly 6 months. At 52, the rancher's face was a map of the harsh Wyoming territory. Deep lines, etched by sun, wind, and the weight of a life lived on his own terms. The journey from his isolated ranch had taken 2 days, but news of the railroad's imminent arrival had finally drawn him to town. He needed supplies, information, and perhaps, though he wouldn't admit it, a brief respite from the solitude that had been both his comfort and his prison since Martha's passing 3 years prior. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel and let us know what city you're watching from. As Samuel dismounted and secured his horse to the hitching post outside the general store, he couldn't shake the feeling that something in Copper Creek had changed. The town seemed more alive, with unfamiliar faces moving along the boardwalks and the distant sound of a piano drifting from the newly expanded Golden Nugget Saloon. Progress was coming, whether the old-timers like him wanted it or not. He adjusted the revolver at his hip, a Colt single-action army that had seen him through 2 decades of frontier life, and climbed the wooden steps to Jensen's General Store. The familiar bell jingled as he pushed open the door, the scent of coffee, leather, and tobacco greeting him like an old friend. "Well, I'll be damned, Sam Hayworth in the flesh!" Harold Jensen's booming voice carried across the store. The shopkeeper, a barrel-chested man with a salt and pepper beard, emerged from behind the counter with his hand extended. "Thought maybe the wolves had gotten you up in that valley of yours." Samuel allowed a rare half-smile to cross his face as he clasped the man's hand. "Takes more than wolves to bring down this old dog, Harold. How's business?" "Booming." Railroad surveyors have been here for weeks now. Land prices are doubling faster than I can count, and every day brings new folks looking to stake their claim before the iron horse arrives. Harold lowered his voice. "Not all good folks either, if you catch my meaning." Samuel nodded, understanding immediately. He'd seen it before. Towns transformed by the promise of prosperity, drawing predators along with the prosperity. Any familiar faces among the newcomers? Harold's expression darkened slightly. "A few. Thomas Blackwood's in town." The name hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken history. Samuel's jaw tightened imperceptibly. 20 years had passed since he'd last encountered Thomas Blackwood during the bloody land disputes of '75. They'd been on opposite sides then, Samuel defending his newly purchased ranch against Blackwood's hired guns, who'd claimed the water rights belonged to his employer. 3 men had died before Blackwood retreated, but Samuel had never forgotten the man's parting words. "Time favors the patient, Hayworth." "He's bought the old Sullivan place," Harold continued, watching Samuel's face carefully. "And he's not alone. Got a woman with him. Calls herself Rebecca Sinclair. Pretty as a picture, but sharp as a tack. She's opened a dress shop down by the new hotel." Samuel pushed thoughts of Blackwood aside, focusing on his supply list. "I need the usual, Harold. Flour, coffee, ammunition, and some new fence wire. Might as well stock up before winter hits." As Harold gathered the supplies, Samuel browsed the store, noting the new items that catered to the changing clientele. fancy canned goods, imported fabrics, and ladies. Accessories that would have been unthinkable luxuries in Copper Creek just a year ago. The town was shedding its rugged skin, and Samuel wasn't sure how he felt about that. His gaze lingered on a small silver hair comb, adorned with tiny blue stones, the color Martha had always favored. For a moment, he could almost hear her gentle teasing about his sentimentality hidden beneath that gruff exterior. "Add that comb," Samuel said suddenly, surprising even himself. Harold raised an eyebrow, but wisely made no comment as he added it to the growing pile of supplies. The bell above the door jingled again, and Samuel turned to see Sheriff James Cooper enter. The lawman had aged since Samuel had last seen him, gray now, dominating his once dark mustache, but his eyes remained sharp and observant. Cooper nodded in recognition. "Hayworth, good to see you in town. Staying long?" "Just getting supplies. Heading back tomorrow." Cooper stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Might want to make it a longer stay. Cattle rustlers hit the Thompson place last night. Third ranch this month. They're getting bolder, moving in larger groups. Your isolated spread could be tempting." Samuel frowned. "I can handle rustlers." "Not these ones, Sam. They're organized, military precision, according to witnesses, and they leave no survivors." The warning settled uncomfortably in Samuel's chest. His ranch hands were capable men, but they numbered only 4. If a large, organized gang set their sights on his cattle, it could spell disaster. "I appreciate the warning, James. I'll keep my eyes open." After settling his account with Harold, Samuel loaded his supplies onto his pack horse. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the western sky in brilliant shades of orange and crimson. He should secure a room at the boarding house, but the Golden Nugget's siren call of whiskey and information proved too tempting to resist. Intelligence was currency on the frontier, and the saloon was its bank. The Golden Nugget had indeed expanded since his last visit, nearly doubling in size, with a new wing that housed poker tables and what appeared to be a small stage for entertainment. The crowd inside was a mixture of familiar local faces and strangers, railroad men, land speculators, and the inevitable gamblers and drifters that followed opportunity like wolves trailing a wounded deer. Samuel made his way to the bar, nodding to those he recognized while assessing the newcomers with practiced caution. "Whiskey," he ordered from the bartender, a young man he didn't recognize who had replaced old Tom Murphy behind the counter. As the amber liquid was poured, Samuel surveyed the room in the bar mirror, his gaze stopping abruptly on a figure seated at a corner table. Thomas Blackwood hadn't changed much in 20 years, still lean and hawk-faced, with cold eyes that calculated everything in terms of profit and loss. The only concession to time was the silver streaking his once black hair. He was deep in conversation with a well-dressed man Samuel didn't recognize. Their heads bent close together over what appeared to be a map. "That's 2 bits," the bartender said, interrupting Samuel's observations. As Samuel reached for his coins, a woman's voice spoke from just behind his left shoulder. "Put it on my account, Jimmy." Samuel turned to find himself looking into the most striking pair of green eyes he'd encountered in years. They belonged to a woman perhaps 10 years his junior, elegantly dressed in a burgundy traveling suit that spoke of Eastern tailoring and significant means. Her chestnut hair was arranged fashionably, though a few rebellious strands had escaped, to frame a face that balanced refinement with an unmistakable frontier hardness. This, he realized, must be Rebecca Sinclair. "Mr. Hayworth, I presume?" she said, her voice carrying a hint of Southern accent beneath its cultured tones. "Your reputation precedes you." Samuel tipped his hat slightly, guard immediately raised. "Miss Sinclair, seems you have the advantage of me." A smile played at the corner of her mouth. "In more ways than one, perhaps. May I join you? I believe we have matters of mutual interest to discuss." Before Samuel could respond, her gloved hand reached up to the ornate brooch at her collar. "Let me take it off," she smiled, unfastening the piece of jewelry. "It belonged to my mother, and I'd hate to lose it in a crowded establishment." The rancher froze. Something in her tone and the deliberate way she removed the brooch triggering an instinctive caution. It was a signal, though for what or to whom he couldn't immediately discern. His eyes darted to the mirror, noticing Blackwood now watching their interaction with poorly disguised interest. "A family heirloom?" Samuel asked, playing along while his mind raced to understand the currents swirling around him. "Of sorts," she replied, tucking the brooch into a small purse. "Like many treasured possessions, its true value lies in its history, rather than its appearance." She gestured to a vacant table. "Shall we?" As they sat, Samuel positioned himself with his back to the wall, maintaining a clear view of both Blackwood and the saloon entrance. Rebecca Sinclair ordered herself a sherry, waiting until the bartender retreated before speaking again. "I understand you and Mr. Blackwood are acquainted," she said, her eyes studying Samuel's face with unnerving intensity. "We've crossed paths. And drawn guns in the process, I hear." When Samuel remained silent, she continued. "Blackwood speaks quite colorfully of you. It seems you made quite an impression." "Most impressions involving Blackwood end up 6 feet under," Samuel replied evenly. "What's your connection to him?" Rebecca sipped her sherry before answering. "Business partners, officially. The dress shop is a convenient arrangement for both of us. Mr. Blackwood provides capital. I provide respectability and connections that a man of his reputation might find difficult to establish directly." Samuel's eyes narrowed slightly. "And unofficially?" "Unofficially, Mr. Hayworth, I'm a woman with excellent hearing who's grown tired of certain conversations taking place in my back room." She leaned forward slightly. "Conversations about water rights, cattle rustling, and a particular rancher who needs to be removed before the railroad negotiations conclude." The pieces clicked into place with alarming clarity. The rustling, Blackwood's return, the railroad surveys. It wasn't coincidence. "Why tell me this?" Samuel asked, voice pitched low. "What's your stake?" Rebecca glanced toward Blackwood, who was now watching them openly. "Let's just say Mr. Blackwood and I have different interpretations of our partnership agreement. And unlike the other men who've crossed him, I plan to remain breathing when we part ways." Before Samuel could press further, the saloon door swung open with a bang. Sheriff Cooper stood in the entrance, his expression grim as he scanned the room. His deputy, young Billy Fletcher, flanked him with a shotgun held ready. "Thomas Blackwood," Cooper called out, his voice cutting through the sudden silence that had fallen over the saloon. "I need a word about the Thompson murders." All eyes turned to Blackwood, who remained unnervingly calm as he folded the map on his table with deliberate precision. "Sheriff Cooper," he replied smoothly, "I've been right here all evening. Ask anyone." "Didn't say when they died," Cooper replied. "Just said I wanted a word." Tension crackled through the room like heat lightning. Samuel's hand instinctively moved closer to his revolver, while beside him Rebecca had gone very still. Blackwood's eyes flicked briefly to a table of hard-looking men near the back door. men Samuel hadn't noticed earlier, but who now sat with the coiled readiness of rattlesnakes. "Of course, Sheriff," Blackwood finally replied, standing slowly. "Always happy to assist the law, though I do hope this won't take long. Miss Sinclair and I have business to conclude this evening." As Blackwood moved toward the lawman, his gaze locked with Samuel's for a moment. The hatred there was undisguised, decades old, but undiminished by time. Then his eyes shifted to Rebecca, and Samuel saw something else there: calculation, suspicion, and a sight. "I believe," Rebecca whispered as Blackwood left with the sheriff, "that our conversation has just become considerably more urgent, Mr. Hayworth." Samuel drained his whiskey, making his decision. "My room at the boarding house, 1 hour. Come through the back stairs." He stood, leaving a coin on the table despite her earlier gesture. "And Miss Sinclair, if this is some play between you and Blackwood, remember that I've survived worse schemes than whatever you two cooked up." Her smile was tight, her eyes suddenly hard as the emeralds they resembled. "Trust me, Mr. Hayworth, if I wanted you dead, we wouldn't be having this conversation." As Samuel stepped into the night air, the weight of unfinished business and new threats pressed down on him like an approaching storm. Copper Creek had changed indeed, but some things remained constant: the smell of danger, the inevitability of violence, and the understanding that on the frontier, survival often hinged on decisions made in the space between one heartbeat and the next. He checked his revolver, ensuring all 6 chambers were loaded. Whatever came next, Samuel Hayworth would meet it as he had every other challenge in his long, hard life, with steel in his hand and iron in his spine. The boarding house was quiet when Samuel entered, most patrons still at supper or enjoying the evening's entertainment at the saloon. Mrs. Willoughby, the proprietress, handed him a key with minimal conversation, accustomed to his preference for privacy. The room was small but clean, a narrow bed, washstand, and chair constituting the entirety of its furnishings. Samuel placed his saddlebags on the bed and methodically checked his weapons: the Colt revolver, a Winchester rifle he retrieved from its scabbard, and the knife sheathed in his boot. Weapons inspected, he positioned himself near the window, drawing the thin curtain aside, just enough to observe the street below. Copper Creek's main street was bathed in patches of golden light from saloon windows and the occasional street lamp, while shadows concealed potential threats in doorways and alleyways. Samuel watched as Sheriff Cooper and his deputy escorted Blackwood back to what appeared to be the land office, converted now into some kind of headquarters for Blackwood's operations. The meeting had been brief, too brief for any real questioning about murders. Whatever game the sheriff was playing, it had just become more complicated. A soft knock at the door, precisely 1 hour after their parting at the saloon, announced Rebecca Sinclair's arrival. Samuel opened the door with his left hand, right hand resting near his holster, to find her standing alone in the dim hallway. She had changed into simpler, darker clothing, practical wear that would attract less attention than her earlier finery. Without a word, he ushered her inside and secured the door. "You weren't followed?" he asked, returning to his position by the window. "I've been avoiding unwanted attention since before you started ranching, Mr. Hayworth," she replied, removing her shawl. "No one saw me come." In the lantern light, Samuel noticed details he'd missed in the saloon: a small scar near her right temple, partially hidden by her hair, and the calluses on her hands visible now that she'd removed her gloves. This was no delicate Eastern flower, despite her cultivated manner. She had lived rough at some point, perhaps recently. You mentioned urgency, Samuel prompted. I'm listening. Rebecca paced the small room once before speaking. Blackwood isn't just after your ranch, though that's certainly part of it. He's systematically acquiring, through various means, all properties along the proposed railroad route. The murders, the rustling, they're all part of a campaign to clear obstacles. For what purpose? Land speculation? Initially, yes, she confirmed. But the larger scheme involves water rights. The railroad needs water for its steam engines. Whoever controls the water sources along the route controls the railroad's options. Your ranch sits atop the largest aquifer in the region, a fact that recent surveys have confirmed. Samuel processed this information, connecting it to his own observations. The new well we dug last spring, it's been producing more than expected, and it never runs dry, even in drought. Exactly. Blackwood learned of this from the survey reports. He plans to dam the creek that runs through your property, divert the water flow to serve the railroad, and charge exorbitant rates. The railroad companies will have no choice but to pay or reroute entirely. And the rustling? Pressure tactics. Make running your ranch untenable. Steal your livelihood, frighten your hands into leaving. When you're vulnerable enough, he'll make an offer far below value. If you refuse, she left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. Samuel studied her face, searching for deception. You still haven't explained your role in all this, or why you're betraying your business partner. Something dark flickered across her expression. Let's just say Mr. Blackwood and I have a complicated history. My reasons for opposing him are personal. Not good enough, Samuel countered. You're asking me to trust you with my life based on it's personal? I need more than that. Rebecca hesitated, then reached up to push back her hair, fully revealing the scar at her temple. 5 years ago, I owned a prosperous millinery shop in Denver. Thomas Blackwood was involved with my sister, Margaret. When she discovered certain irregularities in his business dealings, she confronted him. He beat her severely. She never fully recovered her faculties. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes burned with a cold fury. When I threatened to go to the authorities, his men burned my shop to the ground with me inside it. I survived. Barely. Margaret wasn't so fortunate. And yet you're his business partner now, Samuel observed, though the pieces were beginning to align. The best place to strike a snake is from beside it, she replied simply. I've spent 3 years building this identity, gaining his confidence, positioning myself within his operation. I've been gathering evidence of his crimes, names, dates, financial records, enough to hang him 10 times over. Why not take it to the law? Rebecca's laugh held no humor. Sheriff Cooper, the man who just escorted Blackwood back to his office after the briefest questioning about a triple murder? Blackwood owns him, along with the circuit judge and half the territorial officials. She shook her head. No, conventional justice isn't an option. Samuel moved away from the window, weighing his next words carefully. What exactly are you proposing, Miss Sinclair? An alliance, Mr. Hayworth. Blackwood's men will come for you within the week. The rustling was just the beginning. When they do, we'll be ready. Between your knowledge of the land and my knowledge of his operation, we can turn the tables. And when the dust settles, you'll have your ranch, I'll have my justice, and Thomas Blackwood will have a pine box. The grandfather clock in the boarding house hallway chimed 10 times, its deep tones punctuating the silence that followed her proposal. Samuel had survived the frontier by trusting his instincts about people. And those instincts were sending conflicting signals about Rebecca Sinclair. Her story rang true, but he sensed she was still withholding crucial details. "I don't make decisions about killing men based on stories I can't verify," Samuel finally said. "But I will hear your plan. Then I'll decide." Rebecca nodded, accepting his caution as reasonable. "Fair enough. First, we need to—" A gunshot echoed from the street below, followed immediately by shouting. Samuel moved swiftly to the window, Rebecca close behind him. Even from this distance, Samuel recognized the distinctive hat and badge of Deputy Billy Fletcher. "It's starting," Rebecca whispered. "Blackwood's eliminating potential witnesses and obstacles. The sheriff will be next if he's not already compromised." Samuel grabbed his rifle. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me." That's exactly what they want, to draw you out, isolated and exposed. But Samuel was already checking his ammunition. "That boy's barely 20. If there's a chance he's still alive, I'm not sitting here while he bleeds out." Rebecca caught his arm. "Then I'm coming with you. I can handle a gun, and 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. Samuel hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Stay behind me. Watch the roof lines. If you see movement, don't hesitate." They descended the back stairs quietly, emerging into the alley behind the boarding house. The commotion from the street had drawn most of the town's attention, leaving the backways relatively deserted. Samuel led them through the shadows between buildings, approaching the scene from an angle that afforded some cover. The crowd around Deputy Fletcher had grown, with someone calling loudly for a doctor. From their vantage point in the narrow space between the bank and the land office, Samuel could see that Fletcher was still moving, clutching his shoulder as 2 townsmen tried to stem the bleeding. Sheriff Cooper was nowhere in sight. Samuel scanned the surrounding buildings, noting a shadow moving on the roof of the assay office across the street. Exactly the position a smart shooter would take to monitor the aftermath of his work. "Second floor of the assay office," Samuel murmured to Rebecca. "Someone's watching." Before she could respond, the back door of the land office swung open just a few feet from their position. Light spilled into the alley, followed by the unmistakable silhouette of Thomas Blackwood. He was speaking to someone still inside the building. "Make sure it's done properly this time." Blackwood's cold voice carried clearly in the night air. "No witnesses, no loose ends." Fletcher was just a warning shot. Cooper needs to understand that his continued health depends on his cooperation. He paused, listening to a response they couldn't hear. "As for Hayworth, I want him taken tonight. Use the woman if necessary. She served her purpose. Meet me at the rendezvous point when it's done." The door began to close, and Samuel made his decision in an instant. He lunged forward, jamming his boot in the doorway and shouldering it open with enough force to send Blackwood stumbling backward into the office. Samuel followed immediately, rifle raised, with Rebecca close behind. Inside, the land office had been transformed into an operational headquarters. Maps covered the walls, documents littered the tables, and a large safe stood open in the corner. Blackwood recovered his balance quickly, his hand moving toward the pistol at his hip. Samuel's rifle barrel, pressed against his chest, stopped the movement cold. "Evening, Blackwood," Samuel said quietly. "Sounds like you've been making plans that involve me." Blackwood's eyes darted to Rebecca, his expression shifting from surprise to calculated malice. "Well, well, Miss Sinclair, I see you've chosen your side prematurely. Disappointing, but not unexpected. The only thing premature was your assumption that I could be bought or intimidated, she replied, moving to secure the door behind them. Samuel noticed movement in his peripheral vision. A man emerging from the back room with a shotgun. "Down!" he shouted, pushing Rebecca aside as he swung his rifle toward the new threat. The shotgun roared, pellets splintering the doorframe where they had been standing seconds before. Samuel's return shot was more accurate, dropping the gunman with a chest wound that left him gasping on the floor. In the momentary distraction, Blackwood made his move, drawing his pistol with practiced speed. Samuel pivoted back, but knew he wouldn't be fast enough. The sound of a gunshot filled the room, but it was Blackwood who staggered, a look of shock crossing his features as blood blossomed on his right sleeve. Rebecca stood with a small derringer in her hand, smoke still curling from its barrel. "That was for Margaret," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "And it's just the beginning." Blackwood's wounded arm hung useless, but his left hand was already reaching for a second weapon concealed at his back. Samuel closed the distance between them in 2 strides, the butt of his rifle connecting solidly with Blackwood's temple. The man crumpled to the floor, unconscious but alive. "We need to move," Samuel said urgently, gathering the fallen weapons. "His men will have heard the shots." Rebecca was already at the safe, quickly sorting through documents and stuffing several into her pockets. "These prove everything: the murders, the land fraud, the bribes. But you're right, we need to leave." The commotion from the street had shifted, footsteps approaching the land office from multiple directions. Samuel assessed their options rapidly. "Back door. We'll take the horses from the livery and head for my ranch. It's defensible and my men are loyal." "And Blackwood?" Rebecca asked, gesturing to the unconscious figure. Samuel considered for only a moment. "We take him. He's our evidence and our leverage." Together, they bound Blackwood's hands and feet, gagged him with his own handkerchief, and hoisted him between them. The wounded gunman in the back room had gone still, his vacant eyes staring at the ceiling. As they slipped out the back door into the alley, the first of Blackwood's men burst through the front entrance of the land office, shouts of alarm rising as they discovered the scene inside. The night that had begun with a simple supply run had transformed into something far more dangerous. A desperate flight with an unconscious criminal, pursued by killers, with only the harsh Wyoming wilderness offering any hope of sanctuary. As they disappeared into the darkness, Samuel Hayworth knew that everything had indeed changed, and there would be no going back to the life he had known just hours before. The livery stable was mercifully unguarded, most of the town's attention still focused on the shooting in the street. Samuel and Rebecca worked quickly in the dim light, saddling 3 horses while keeping the still unconscious Blackwood propped in a corner of an empty stall. Samuel's own chestnut mare nickered softly in recognition as he tightened her cinch, while Rebecca selected a sturdy bay gelding for herself and a draft horse with a broad back to carry their unwilling passenger. "We need to secure him properly for the ride," Samuel whispered, nodding toward Blackwood. "He'll come to before long, and I don't fancy chasing him through the dark if he manages to roll off." Rebecca produced a length of rope from her bag. "I came prepared for contingencies, though I admit this particular scenario wasn't among them." They worked together to bind Blackwood securely to the saddle, creating a makeshift harness that would keep him upright even if unconscious. As Samuel tightened the final knot, Blackwood's eyelids fluttered, a low groan escaping through the gag. "Perfect timing," Samuel muttered. "He'll be fully awake and making noise just when we need stealth." Rebecca checked the street through a crack in the livery door. "We have company. 3 men, armed, checking between buildings." "They're working their way this direction." Samuel made a swift decision. "We don't have time for subtlety. When I give the word, we ride hard, north out of town, then cut east toward the hills once we're clear of the buildings. My property lies beyond the East Ridge. It's about 4 hours hard riding." He checked his rifle one last time. "Stay close, and if we get separated, keep the North Star on your right shoulder until dawn. Then look for Three Sisters Peak. My ranch lies in the valley beyond it." Rebecca nodded, mounting her horse with practiced ease that confirmed she was no stranger to frontier travel. Samuel led Blackwood's horse to the rear door of the livery that opened onto a narrow back street. With a final glance to ensure Rebecca was ready, he swung into his saddle and kicked the door open. "Now!" he called, spurring his horse forward and leading Blackwood's mount by its reins. They burst from the stable like demons fleeing judgment, hooves thundering on the packed earth as they raced toward the northern edge of town. Shouts erupted behind them, followed predictably by gunfire. Wild shots in the darkness that whistled harmlessly overhead or kicked up dust at their horses' heels. Samuel kept low in the saddle, the familiar rhythm of the gallop settling into his bones as they cleared the last buildings and entered the open prairie beyond. For 10 minutes, they maintained their headlong pace, putting crucial distance between themselves and their pursuers. When Samuel finally signaled for a momentary halt atop a small rise, they could see lanterns being lit throughout Copper Creek and horsemen gathering at its northern edge. "They'll organize a proper pursuit now," Samuel said, catching his breath. "We've got maybe a 15-minute head start. Time to change direction." They turned eastward as planned, maintaining a steady gallop that ate up the miles while preserving their horses' stamina. The quarter moon provided just enough light to navigate the increasingly rugged terrain, though it forced them to slow occasionally to pick their way through rocky patches and dry creek beds. Blackwood had fully regained consciousness, his eyes burning with hatred above the gag as he bounced uncomfortably on the draft horse's broad back. After an hour of hard riding, Samuel guided them into a narrow ravine where a trickle of water still flowed despite the dry season. They dismounted to let the horses drink and rest briefly, keeping Blackwood secured in his saddle. "How's the arm?" Samuel asked, noticing Rebecca wince as she stretched. "Old injury. Acts up sometimes," she replied dismissively. "I'll manage." Samuel nodded, respecting her toughness. "We're making good time. Another 3 hours should see us to the ranch, assuming we don't run into any of Blackwood's men along the way." "Or Indians," Rebecca added pragmatically. "This is still contested territory for some bands." "The local Shoshone and I have an understanding," Samuel replied. "They leave my cattle alone, and I ensure my hands respect their hunting grounds to the north." He glanced at Blackwood. "It's men like our friend here who've caused most of the trouble between settlers and natives in these parts." Rebecca approached their captive, studying him with cold detachment. "I think our guest would be more comfortable without this gag, don't you? After all, we're miles from anyone who might hear him." Samuel considered the wisdom of this, but ultimately nodded. Out here, even if Blackwood screamed himself hoarse, it would only serve to exhaust him. Rebecca removed the gag with deliberate slowness, her eyes never leaving Blackwood's face. "You're both dead," Blackwood said, as soon as his mouth was free, his voice raspy but filled with venom. "You have no idea what you've done or who you're dealing with." "Oh, I know exactly who you are," Rebecca replied, her tone conversational, yet underlaid with steel. "A coward who builds his fortune on the bodies of those weaker than himself. A man who beats women and murders ranchers for the crime of owning land you covet." Blackwood spat, missing her by inches. Rich accusations coming from a woman who's built her entire life on lies. "Tell your new friend who you really are, Miss Sinclair. Or should I say, Elizabeth Caldwell, formerly of the Pinkerton Detective Agency." Samuel's eyes snapped to Rebecca's face, searching for confirmation or denial of this revelation. Her expression remained carefully neutral, though a muscle twitched in her jaw. "The Pinkertons fired you for excessive zeal, as I recall," Blackwood continued, gaining confidence from her silence. "After that unfortunate incident with the mine owner in Colorado. How many men died in that fire, Elizabeth? 6? 7? "Enough," Samuel interrupted, stepping between them. "Your games don't interest me, Blackwood. Save your breath for the territorial marshal when we hand over evidence of your crimes." Blackwood laughed, a harsh sound in the quiet ravine. "There won't be any marshal, Hayworth. By this time tomorrow, my men will have found your precious ranch, killed everyone on it, and I'll be counting my profits from the railroad deal." His eyes shifted to Rebecca. "And your evidence? Worthless without someone to testify. Accidents happen so easily on the frontier." Rebecca stepped forward, suddenly, pressing her derringer against Blackwood's temple. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't end this right now," she whispered. "One reason why I should let you draw another breath after what you did to Margaret." Samuel watched the tableau with conflicted emotions. Part of him, the part that had survived decades on the unforgiving frontier, understood and even welcomed the simplicity of frontier justice. But another part, perhaps the last remnant of the young man who had come west seeking a better life rather than an escape, held him back from the precipice of cold-blooded execution. "Because we're not him," Samuel said quietly. "We kill him here, we're no better than the murderer he is." He placed a hand gently on Rebecca's arm. "And because your sister deserves justice, not vengeance taken in a dark ravine where no one will ever know the truth." For a long moment, Rebecca remained frozen, the barrel of her small pistol leaving a circular impression on Blackwood's skin. Then, with a sound that might have been a suppressed sob, she lowered the weapon and stepped back. "You're right," she said, her voice barely audible. "But he's also right about one thing. His men will be coming for your ranch. We need to prepare your people." Samuel nodded, checking the position of the stars. "We've rested long enough. Let's move." They continued their journey through the night, pushing the horses as much as they dared through the increasingly familiar terrain. As they crested a ridge just before dawn, Samuel pulled up, gesturing for Rebecca to join him. Below them, in a sheltered valley carved by an ancient river, lay the Hayworth Ranch, a collection of sturdy log buildings surrounding a main house built of local stone, with corrals, barns, and outbuildings spread across several acres. A creek meandered through the property, its banks lined with cottonwoods whose leaves shimmered silver in the pre-dawn light. Smoke rose from the chimney of the bunkhouse, indicating that at least some of his hands were already awake and preparing for the day's work. "Home," Samuel said simply, a note of pride in his voice that he couldn't quite suppress. "It's beautiful," Rebecca replied, genuine appreciation in her tone. "You've built something remarkable here." Even Blackwood seemed momentarily subdued by the vista, though his expression quickly returned to one of calculated malice. "Enjoy the view while it lasts," he muttered. They descended into the valley as the first true light of dawn broke over the eastern mountains. The ranch came fully alive as they approached, dogs barking an alert, hands emerging from the bunkhouse with rifles ready, and Samuel's foreman, Jacob Turner, striding out to meet them with a Winchester cradled in his arms. "Mr. Hayworth!" Turner called, recognizing his employer with evident relief. "Wasn't expecting you back so soon." His eyes took in the strange procession, Samuel leading a horse carrying a bound man, accompanied by a woman Turner had never seen before. "Trouble in town?" "More than enough to go around, Jacob," Samuel replied, dismounting stiffly after the long ride. "This is Miss Sinclair. She's an ally. And our guest is Thomas Blackwood." Turner's weathered face hardened at the name. Though he hadn't been with Samuel during the land disputes 20 years earlier, he'd heard enough stories to recognize the significance. "The boys and I wondered if those rustlers had anything to do with him. Timing seemed mighty convenient." "More than convenient," Samuel confirmed. "Wake everyone up. We need to prepare for visitors, the unwelcome kind." As Turner hurried to rouse the ranch hands and organize defenses, Samuel led Rebecca and their prisoner toward the main house. Blackwood remained sullenly silent, though his eyes darted continuously around the property, assessing its strengths and vulnerabilities like the predator he was. The stone house was cool inside, preserved from the summer heat by its thick walls. Samuel secured Blackwood to a sturdy chair in what served as his office, a sparsely furnished room dominated by a large oak desk covered with ledgers and maps. Rebecca sank gratefully into another chair, the exhaustion of their night's ride finally catching up with her, now that immediate danger had passed. Samuel poured 3 cups of water from a pitcher on the sideboard, offering one to Rebecca before reluctantly extending one to Blackwood as well. "I'm not in the business of denying water to any man, no matter what he's done," he explained to Rebecca's questioning look. After Blackwood had drunk, Samuel fixed him with a level stare. "Now, let's be practical. Your men are coming. We all know that. What we don't know is how many or when. So here's your chance to be smart, Blackwood. Tell us what we're facing, and maybe you walk away from this alive." Blackwood's laugh held no humor. "You think this ends with a few dead ranch hands and a property dispute? You're in waters too deep for you, Hayworth. The railroad contract is worth millions. The people I answer to make your worst nightmares look like Sunday picnics." "Investors in Chicago," Rebecca interjected. "Eastern money backing a syndicate of land speculators. You're just their local fixer, Blackwood. Expendable muscle with delusions of grandeur." Blackwood's eyes narrowed at her knowledge of his operation. "And you're still the same self-righteous crusader who got her sister killed by sticking her nose where it didn't belong." The barb struck home. Rebecca flinched visibly before recovering her composure. Samuel studied both of them, pieces falling into place. "Pinkerton Detective Agency," he said slowly. "You really were an agent?" Rebecca hesitated, then nodded. "Former agent. Everything else I told you is true, about Margaret, about what he did. The agency wouldn't pursue it. Too many powerful connections. So I resigned and pursued justice my own way." Samuel absorbed this information, weighing it against his instincts about her. Before he could respond, Turner knocked and entered, his expression grave. "Dust cloud to the south," the foreman reported. "Riders coming fast, maybe a dozen, 20 minutes out at most. Samuel nodded. Decision made. Secure the house and outbuildings. Put the women and the cook in the root cellar. Get everyone else armed and in position. He turned to Rebecca. Those documents you took, where are they? She patted her jacket. Right here. Give them to Jacob. If things go badly, he knows a back way out of the valley. Samuel met Turner's eyes, an unspoken message passing between them. The foreman nodded once in understanding before accepting the papers from Rebecca. As Turner left to prepare the ranch's defenses, Samuel turned back to Blackwood. Last chance to be reasonable. Call off your men, and we all might survive this day. Blackwood smiled thinly. You've already sealed your fate, Hayworth. The only question now is how many others die alongside you. Samuel studied the man for a moment longer, then nodded, as if confirming something to himself. Have it your way. He turned to Rebecca. Keep an eye on him. Shoot him if he tries anything. I need to help the men prepare. Outside, the ranch had transformed into a hive of controlled activity. The 4 ranch hands, hardened men who had seen their share of frontier violence, were positioning themselves strategically around the property. The cook, an elderly Chinese man named Li, who had been with Samuel for over a decade, was helping the housekeeper and her daughter into the root cellar beneath the smokehouse, its entrance concealed by stacked firewood. Samuel joined Turner at the main house's front porch, both men scanning the southern approach, where a dust cloud now clearly marked the approaching riders. We're outnumbered, Turner observed matter-of-factly, but we've got good positions and better motivation. Samuel nodded. They had prepared for trouble before. Indian raids in the early years, the occasional band of desperados, but this was different. These men would be coming with a specific purpose and superior numbers. If it goes bad, Samuel said quietly, get those documents to the territorial marshal in Cheyenne. Name's William Matheson. He's straight, one of the few. Turner accepted this contingency with a grim nod. It won't come to that, boss. This land's seen enough blood over the years. It can drink a little more if necessary. The riders appeared on the horizon, spreading out as they approached to present multiple targets. Samuel counted 11 men, all heavily armed, led by a figure he recognized even at this distance, Blackwood's foreman, a notorious gun hand named Riker, who had a reputation for brutality that extended throughout the territory. Inside, Samuel ordered, as the first shots cracked across the morning air. Warning fire, intended to intimidate rather than hit. The real assault would come soon enough. Inside the house, Rebecca had Blackwood's chair positioned away from any windows, her derringer trained steadily on him. Companies arrived, Samuel informed her, checking the loads in his rifle and revolver. 11 men, well armed, led by Riker. Riker? Rebecca repeated, her expression hardening. I should have known he'd be involved. He was Blackwood's triggerman in Denver, too. Blackwood smiled, the expression never reaching his cold eyes. You see, Hayworth, the lady and I have history that goes beyond business arrangements, makes for such interesting complications. A volley of gunfire interrupted the conversation, bullets thudding into the thick stone walls of the house and shattering the glass in one window. Samuel moved to the window beside the front door, keeping to the side to avoid presenting a target. Through the wavy glass, he could see Riker and his men had taken positions behind the corral fence, water trough, and scattered boulders around the property. They were settling in for a siege. Hayworth, Riker's voice carried across the yard. Send out Blackwood and the woman, and we might let the rest of you live. You've got 5 minutes to decide. Samuel exchanged glances with Rebecca. Generous of them, he remarked dryly. Standard opening move, she replied. They'll rush the house once they realize we won't comply. Probably try to set fire to the roof or smoke us out. Stone house, metal roof, Samuel pointed out. Not so easy to burn. A slow smile spread across Blackwood's face. No, but the barn isn't stone, is it? Or the bunkhouse? How long before you send your men out to stop the fires, Hayworth? How many will you sacrifice to protect your precious ranch? As if on cue, a shout came from outside, followed by the distinctive whoosh of a flaming arrow arcing toward the wooden barn. Samuel cursed under his breath. They're not waiting for negotiations. The next few minutes descended into chaos. More flaming arrows fell on the outbuildings, while concentrated rifle fire kept Samuel's men pinned down, unable to reach the water barrels to fight the growing fires. From the window, Samuel could see flames taking hold on the barn roof, smoke beginning to billow into the clear morning sky. Your men are going to die for nothing, Blackwood said, conversationally. All this could have been avoided if you just sold the ranch when you had the chance. Samuel turned from the window, his patience finally exhausted. There never was a chance, Blackwood. 20 years ago, you tried to take what wasn't yours. Today's no different. He moved to the desk, pulling out a locked drawer and extracting a folded document. You want to know why I'll never sell? This land isn't just property to me. It's a promise. He unfolded the document, a deed, yellowed with age but carefully preserved. My wife Martha and I came here with nothing but this deed and a dream of building something that would last. She died bringing our son into the world, and he didn't survive the night. I buried them both on that hill overlooking the creek. His voice remained steady, but his eyes burned with an intensity that made even Blackwood fall silent. This land is their resting place, and I'll be damned if I let you or anyone else turn it into a water depot for your railroad scheme. The moment hung in the air, weighted with decades of grief and determination. Then a new sound cut through the gunfire outside, a high, ululating cry that Samuel recognized instantly, though he hadn't heard it in years. The war cry of the Shoshone. From the North Ridge, a dozen mounted warriors appeared, bows drawn and rifles ready. They descended upon Riker's men like avenging spirits, cutting through their exposed flank with devastating precision. The attackers scrambled for cover, suddenly caught between the defenders in the ranch buildings and the unexpected assault from their rear. You said you had an understanding with the Shoshone, Rebecca said, joining Samuel at the window. I do, he replied, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Chief Grey Wolf's son fell ill last winter. Our doctor treated him when no one else would. The chief said he owed me a debt. Looks like he's chosen his moment to repay it. The tide of battle turned swiftly. Caught in the crossfire, and with their advantage of numbers neutralized, Riker's men began to fall back, dragging their wounded toward the horses they'd left beyond rifle range. Samuel watched as Riker himself took a Shoshone arrow in the shoulder, the force of it spinning him halfway around before he staggered behind a boulder. It's over, Blackwood, Samuel said, turning back to their prisoner. Your men are running. Blackwood's composure cracked for the first time, disbelief and rage warring on his face. Impossible. Riker wouldn't retreat unless... His eyes narrowed suddenly. Unless he had orders to pull back in specific circumstances. A slow, terrible smile spread across his features. Oh, this is rich. You think you've won? The real threat isn't here yet. Rebecca stepped closer, gun still trained on Blackwood. What are you talking about? Insurance policy, Blackwood replied, his confidence returning. I always have one. Riker knows to withdraw if resistance is too strong, fall back, and wait for reinforcements. He glanced meaningfully at the window. Very special reinforcements. A cold certainty settled in Samuel's gut. The rustlers. The ones Cooper warned me about. Blackwood inclined his head in mock salute. Former cavalry. Confederate deserters who found the criminal life more profitable than surrender. 30 men, well-armed and disciplined. They've been operating throughout the territory, creating a climate of fear that makes my land acquisition seem like protection rather than predation. His eyes gleamed with malicious pleasure. And they should be arriving any time now. Samuel exchanged a glance with Rebecca, the gravity of the situation clear in both their expressions. If Blackwood was telling the truth, and Samuel's instincts said he was, they had just weathered the first wave of what would be a much larger assault. The Shoshone warriors, while formidable, were too few to stand against 30 trained fighters, and his own men were already exhausted and running low on ammunition. We need to evacuate, Rebecca said quietly. Get your people out through that back route you mentioned. Samuel shook his head. And go where? They'd run us down before nightfall. This valley is defensible. We make our stand here. A commotion outside drew their attention back to the window. The Shoshone warriors had dismounted and were approaching the house, led by a tall figure in a mixture of traditional dress and cavalry trousers that Samuel recognized as Chief Grey Wolf. Turner was already on the porch to greet them, his posture respectful but wary. Stay with him, Samuel instructed Rebecca, indicating Blackwood. Shoot him if you need to, but let's try to keep him alive. He's still our best bargaining chip. Samuel stepped onto the porch as Chief Grey Wolf approached, raising his hand in greeting. The chief was in his 50s, his face deeply lined by sun and experience, his bearing that of a natural leader. 4 of his warriors flanked him, while the others maintained vigilant positions around the property. Hayworth, the chief greeted him in accented but clear English. My scouts say more bad men come, many more. Samuel nodded. Thank you for your help, Chief. Your debt is paid in full. You and your men should leave before the others arrive. Grey Wolf's expression remained impassive. No debt between friends, only honor. He gestured to the ridge from which they had appeared. My village beyond ridge. Bad men threaten your land, soon threaten mine. Better to fight here, with stone walls, than wait for them to come to our lodges. The chief's logic was impeccable, and his offer of continued alliance more valuable than Samuel could have hoped for. I'm grateful, he said simply, extending his hand in the white man's gesture of agreement. Grey Wolf clasped his forearm in the warrior's grip, stronger and more binding than a mere handshake. We prepare. They come from South Road? Samuel nodded. Most likely. The other approaches are too steep for a large group. Then we ready surprise. The chief turned, issuing rapid instructions to his warriors in their native tongue. 2 immediately mounted and rode toward the ridge, presumably to bring more of their people, while the others began to examine the ranch's defenses with practiced eyes. Inside the house, Samuel found Rebecca and Blackwood as he had left them, though the tension between them seemed to have intensified in his absence. Blackwood's earlier smugness had given way to a calculating stillness that Samuel found more concerning than his taunts. The Shoshone are staying to help, Samuel informed Rebecca. Grey Wolf says his scouts report a large group approaching from the south, exactly as our friend Hugh predicted. How long? Rebecca asked. 2 hours, maybe 3. Not enough time to get everyone safely away, but enough to prepare. Samuel studied Blackwood, whose eyes had narrowed at the mention of the Shoshone reinforcements. Our position just got stronger, Blackwood. Your men will be riding into a trap. Last chance to be reasonable. Blackwood maintained his silence, but something had changed in his demeanor. A slight hesitation that suggested he was reassessing his odds. Samuel pressed the advantage. Those documents Rebecca took, they're enough to hang you, aren't they? Names, dates, financial records of bribes and murders. The territorial marshal might be beyond your influence, especially with Shoshone witnesses to today's attack. A muscle twitched in Blackwood's jaw, the only indication that Samuel's words had struck home. After a long moment, he spoke, his voice low and controlled. What do you want, Hayworth? Your men turn around. You stand trial for your crimes. My ranch and water rights remain untouched. Blackwood barked a humorless laugh. You're asking me to choose between a noose and a bullet. Some choice. Those are the only options left to you, Samuel replied evenly. But if you cooperate, I'll speak to the judge about consideration for your assistance. Prison instead of hanging. Rebecca stiffened beside him, but held her tongue. This was the way of the frontier. Pragmatic compromises that sometimes left justice only partially served, but preserved lives that would otherwise be lost. Samuel waited as Blackwood visibly weighed his limited options. I need proof my men will listen, Blackwood finally said. Riker won't take orders from you or the woman. He'll need to hear it from me directly. Samuel considered this. It could be a trap, a way for Blackwood to alert his men to the defenses being prepared. But it was also their best chance to avoid bloodshed on a scale that would leave the valley forever marked by tragedy. We'll arrange it, Samuel decided, when your reinforcements are within sight. One chance, Blackwood. Make it count. The next 2 hours passed in a flurry of preparations. Under Grey Wolf's direction, the Shoshone warriors created hidden positions along the likely approach route, while Samuel's men reinforced the house and remaining outbuildings. The barn continued to smolder, but had been prevented from burning completely by a bucket brigade of ranch hands and Shoshone alike. Turner organized their dwindling ammunition, distributing it according to skill and position. Rebecca proved herself invaluable, her Pinkerton training evident in the tactical suggestions she offered and the calm efficiency with which she moved between tasks. She maintained a careful watch on Blackwood throughout, never allowing him an opportunity to communicate with the remnants of Riker's men who had taken refuge beyond rifle range to the south. As the sun climbed toward its zenith, the lookout, posted on the roof, called down the warning they had been expecting. A large dust cloud approaching from the south, still several miles distant, but closing steadily. It's time, Samuel told Rebecca, returning to the office where Blackwood remained secured to his chair. We need to move him outside, let him call off Riker and the others before the main force arrives. Blackwood met his gaze steadily. I'll need assurances that my cooperation will be noted. Written assurances. You'll have them, Samuel replied, after your men stand down. They escorted Blackwood to the front porch, his hands still bound, but with enough freedom of movement to gesture naturally. Riker and 3 of his remaining men watched from their positions behind boulders near the southern fence line. Too far for accurate shooting, but close enough to observe developments at the house. Call him in, Samuel instructed Blackwood. Tell him to bring a white flag. Blackwood hesitated only briefly before raising his voice. "Riker, come up to the house. Bring a truce flag." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Riker emerged cautiously from behind his boulder, tying a dirty white handkerchief to his rifle barrel before advancing slowly toward the house. His wounded shoulder had been roughly bandaged, the cloth already soaked through with blood that had dried to a rusty brown in the summer heat. Samuel kept his rifle ready but pointed downward as Riker approached, stopping at the foot of the porch steps. The gunman's eyes flickered between Blackwood, Samuel, and Rebecca, assessing the situation with the cold calculation of a professional killer. "Boss," Riker acknowledged Blackwood. "Situation's complicated. Reinforcements are an hour out, but these Shoshone have good positions." His gaze shifted to Samuel. "What's the play here, Hayworth?" Before Samuel could answer, Blackwood spoke, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of command. "The situation has changed, Riker. We're negotiating a settlement." Riker's expression remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "What kind of settlement?" "Tell the men to pull back," Blackwood continued. "All of them. No reinforcements. We're done here." A tense silence followed this unexpected order. Riker studied his employer's face, perhaps looking for some hidden signal or sign of coercion. Finding none, he finally spoke, his tone carefully measured. "That's a significant change of plans, Mr. Blackwood. The investors won't be pleased. The investors will understand cutting losses when necessary," Blackwood replied smoothly. "We have other options for the railroad contract. Hayworth's ranch isn't worth the complications." He nodded toward the ridge, where several Shoshone warriors were now visible. "Especially these complications." Riker absorbed this, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts. "And you, sir? Will you be riding back with us?" "Mr. Blackwood has some legal matters to attend to first," Samuel interjected before Blackwood could respond. "He'll be accompanying us to Cheyenne to speak with the territorial marshal." Riker's hand twitched almost imperceptibly toward his holstered pistol, a movement that didn't escape Samuel's notice. "That wasn't part of our arrangement with the investors, sir." "Plans change, Riker," Blackwood said firmly. "Stand down. That's an order." For a moment that stretched like heated taffy, Riker seemed poised on the edge of violence. Samuel tensed, finger moving closer to his rifle's trigger, aware that Rebecca had shifted her position slightly to gain a clearer shot if needed. Then, with a nearly imperceptible nod, Riker stepped back. "As you say, Mr. Blackwood." He turned to go, then paused, looking back over his shoulder. "Any message for the others when they arrive?" "Tell them to return to base and await further instructions," Blackwood replied. "No exceptions." Riker touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement and walked slowly back toward his men, his posture revealing nothing of whatever thoughts or emotions might be churning beneath his professional exterior. Samuel watched him go, the tension in his shoulders easing only slightly. Something about the exchange felt wrong. Too easy, too clean a resolution, after so much blood and fire. "He'll do as ordered," Blackwood said, noting Samuel's continued vigilance. "Riker's many things, but he's not stupid enough to disobey a direct command from the man who signs his pay vouchers." Rebecca moved closer to Samuel, keeping her voice low. "I don't trust this. Riker's reputation suggests he's not the type to walk away from a fight, especially with reinforcements on the way." Samuel nodded slightly in agreement. "Chief," he called to Grey Wolf, who stood nearby with two of his warriors. "Have your scouts keep watch on those men. Make sure they're actually leaving." The chief nodded, dispatching his men with quiet instructions. Samuel turned back to Blackwood, studying the man's face for any sign of deception. "If this is a trick, it's no trick," Blackwood interrupted. "Merely a calculation of odds and outcomes. I've built my fortune by knowing when to advance and when to retreat." Hayworth. Today, retreat is the sensible option. Samuel wasn't convinced, but with the immediate threat apparently neutralized, they had gained valuable time to strengthen their position before the arrival of the larger force. He gestured for Turner to take Blackwood back inside, then turned to Rebecca. "What do you think?" he asked once Blackwood was out of earshot. "I think he's playing for time," she replied frankly. "The documents I took are damaging, but not as damaging as he's pretending. There's something else at work here." Samuel nodded, his own instincts sending similar warnings. "Keep a close eye on him. I need to coordinate with the chief about watching the approaches." He paused, then added quietly, "If Riker ignores that order and attacks anyway, we're in for a hell of a fight." Rebecca met his gaze steadily. "Not my first firefight, Mr. Hayworth, and I suspect it won't be my last." As Samuel moved to join Grey Wolf in assessing their defenses, he found himself reflecting on the remarkable woman who had upended his quiet existence less than 24 hours ago. Rebecca Sinclair, or Elizabeth Caldwell, or whatever her true name might be, was unlike anyone he'd encountered in his decades on the frontier. Beneath her cultivated exterior lay a core of steel, tempered by personal tragedy, and a determination that matched his own. The next hour passed in tense vigilance. Grey Wolf's scouts reported that Riker and his remaining men had indeed withdrawn several miles to the south, presumably to intercept and redirect the approaching reinforcements. This news brought cautious relief, but no relaxation of their preparations. If Blackwood's order was ignored, they would need every advantage they could muster. Inside the house, Rebecca maintained her watch over Blackwood, who had lapsed into a contemplative silence that seemed more calculating than defeated. Samuel checked on them periodically between consultations with Turner and Grey Wolf, each time finding the same tableau: Rebecca alert and watchful, Blackwood still and thoughtful, the air between them charged with unspoken history and mutual antipathy. As the sun began its westward descent, casting long shadows across the valley, a Shoshone scout rode hard into the ranch yard, his horse lathered from exertion. He spoke rapidly to Grey Wolf in their native tongue, gesturing urgently toward the southern horizon. The chief's expression darkened as he listened. "What is it?" Samuel asked as the scout finished his report. "Bad men split," Grey Wolf replied grimly. "Some go east with leader. Others still come, many through Hidden Canyon." Samuel processed this information quickly. "They're trying to flank us. Hit us from 2 directions at once." He glanced toward the house where Blackwood waited. He knew. That's why he was so willing to cooperate. Grey Wolf nodded in agreement. "Riker, take 10 men east. 20 still come north through Eagle Canyon. We'll reach here before sunset." Samuel made his decision instantly. "Chief, can your warriors delay the group coming through the canyon? Not stop them, just slow them down. We need time." Grey Wolf considered for only a moment before nodding. "Can do. Narrow places in canyon. Good for ambush." He turned to issue orders to his men, several of whom mounted immediately and rode eastward at a gallop. Samuel strode back to the house, anger and resolve hardening his features. Inside, he found Rebecca and Turner discussing ammunition distribution while Blackwood watched, with undisguised interest from his secured position. Riker split his forces, Samuel announced without preamble. He's leading a group east, presumably to circle around and hit us from behind while the main force comes through Eagle Canyon. His gaze fixed on Blackwood. You knew this would happen. Blackwood's smile held no warmth. I suspected he might show some initiative. Riker's a good employee that way, anticipates my needs even when I can't express them directly. Rebecca stepped forward, her derringer appearing in her hand as if by magic. You manipulated us. The entire surrender was a sham to buy time for your men to get into position. Business, my dear, Blackwood replied smoothly. Nothing personal. Well, perhaps a little personal in your case. Samuel restrained Rebecca with a gentle hand on her arm. He's not worth it. We need to prepare for the attack. He turned to Turner. Jacob, get everyone into defensive positions. The Shoshone are setting up delaying actions in the canyon, but we'll have company before sunset. 20 men, at least. As Turner hurried to organize their defenses, Samuel considered their options. They were outnumbered, potentially surrounded if Riker's flanking maneuver succeeded, and running low on ammunition after the morning's firefight. The stone house would provide their best protection, but they couldn't abandon the remaining outbuildings without giving the attackers valuable cover within the ranch compound itself. We need to even the odds, Samuel said finally. Turner, take 2 men and set charges in the bunkhouse and the remaining barn. If we can't defend them, we'll deny them to Riker's men. Turner nodded grimly and departed to carry out the instructions. Samuel turned back to Rebecca and Blackwood, his decision made. Miss Sinclair, help me move our guests to the root cellar. If we're overrun, that's our fallback position. Small entrance, easily defended. You're going to lose, Hayworth, Blackwood said as they escorted him outside toward the concealed entrance of the root cellar. Riker has 20 experienced fighters. Your ranch hands are good men, I'm sure, but they're not soldiers. Neither am I, Samuel replied evenly. But I've buried enough friends and family in this valley to know what's worth fighting for. Can you say the same? Blackwood had no answer for that, lapsing into silence as they secured him in the cool darkness of the root cellar, where the housekeeper and her daughter already waited in fearful silence. Samuel instructed Rebecca to brief them on the situation while he returned to coordinate the final preparations for defense. The sun was sinking toward the western ridgeline when the first shots echoed from the direction of Eagle Canyon. Grey Wolf's delaying tactics had begun. Samuel positioned himself on the upper floor of the house, which offered the best vantage point of the southern and eastern approaches. Through his field glasses, a prized possession from his army days, he could see dust and smoke rising from the canyon mouth, evidence of the Shoshone ambush slowing the attackers' advance. To the east, however, there was no sign yet of Riker's flanking party. They would be moving more cautiously, taking advantage of the broken terrain to conceal their approach. Samuel estimated they had perhaps 30 minutes before the main force broke through the canyon, and maybe an hour before Riker's group could work their way into position on the eastern ridge. Rebecca joined him at the window, her own preparations complete. She had exchanged her dress for trousers and a man's shirt, borrowed from one of the ranch hands, the practical attire allowing greater freedom of movement. The gun belt now circled her waist, supporting a revolver in addition to her derringer. The women are secure, she reported, and I've moved most of our ammunition reserves to the root cellar, as you suggested. If we're forced to retreat, we'll have supplies to hold out. She studied the distant canyon through the field glasses Samuel handed her. "The Shoshone are putting up quite a fight." Samuel nodded. "Grey Wolf is a cunning tactician. He'll make them pay for every yard of ground." He hesitated, then added quietly, "You should know, there's a back way out of the root cellar. Tunnel leads to a hidden exit beyond the eastern ridge. If things go badly, get the women out that way. Head north to the Shoshone village. Grey Wolf's people will guide you to Cheyenne." Rebecca lowered the glasses, meeting his gaze directly. "And you?" "This is my home," Samuel replied simply. "I've run from trouble before, in my younger days. I'm too old to start again somewhere new." A complex emotion flickered across Rebecca's face: respect, sadness, and something else that Samuel couldn't quite name. "I didn't take you for a fatalist, Mr. Hayworth." "Not fatalism, just knowing where a man belongs." He turned back to the window, adjusting the field glasses. "Besides, I'm not planning on dying today. Too much unfinished business." Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "Including?" Samuel surprised himself with a small smile. "Thought I might rebuild that barn. Maybe add a proper guest room to the house. Gets lonely out here sometimes." Before Rebecca could respond, a shout from below announced the return of several Shoshone warriors, riding hard for the ranch compound. Samuel hurried downstairs to meet them, Rebecca close behind. Grey Wolf was among the returning party, blood staining his left sleeve from what appeared to be a minor wound. "They break through soon," the chief reported tersely. "Lost 3 warriors. Enemy lost more, but still strong. 17, maybe 18 men coming." "And Riker's group?" Samuel asked. "No sign yet. My scouts watch Eastern Ridge." Samuel nodded his thanks. "Your men have done more than enough, Chief. You should take your wounded and fall back to your village." Grey Wolf's expression hardened. "Shoshone not abandon friends. We fight together." There was no time to argue the point, even had Samuel been inclined to do so. The distant gunfire was growing closer, indicating that the main force had broken through the last of the Shoshone delaying positions and would soon emerge from the canyon mouth. Samuel directed Grey Wolf and his remaining warriors to positions around the ranch house, integrating them with his own men to form a defensive perimeter that covered all approaches. As the last light of day painted the western sky in shades of crimson and gold, Samuel took his position at an upper window of the house, Winchester at the ready. Beside him, Rebecca checked her weapons one final time, her face composed but alert. Below, in the gathering shadows of the ranch yard, Samuel's men and the Shoshone warriors waited in tense silence for the coming storm. "Whatever happens," Samuel said quietly, "I'm glad our paths crossed, Miss Sinclair." Rebecca met his gaze, something unspoken passing between them that transcended their brief acquaintance. "As am I, Mr. Hayworth, more than I expected to be." Before Samuel could respond, the first riders emerged from the canyon mouth, silhouetted against the twilight sky. The battle for Hayworth Ranch, and perhaps for their very lives, was about to begin. The attackers approached with the discipline that Blackwood had warned of, spreading out to present multiple targets while maintaining concentrated firepower. Samuel counted 17 men, just as Grey Wolf had estimated, all heavily armed and moving with the coordinated precision of experienced fighters. Their leader, a tall man with a distinctive red bandana, directed the advance with hand signals rather than shouts, confirming Samuel's suspicion that these were indeed former military men rather than common outlaws. "Wait for my signal," Samuel called softly to the defenders positioned throughout the ranch buildings. "Let them commit to the approach." Beside him, Rebecca tracked the attackers through the field glasses. "They're holding back 4 men near the canyon entrance," she reported. "Probably a reserve force to exploit any breakthrough." Samuel nodded. It was exactly what he would have done in their position. "Focus on the advance group first. If we can break them, the others might reconsider." The attackers had reached the outer fence line, dismounting to continue on foot and using the scattered boulders and uneven ground for cover. They were still beyond effective rifle range when Samuel gave the signal. "Now!" he called, and the ranch erupted in coordinated gunfire. 3 attackers fell immediately, caught in the unexpected fusillade from hidden positions. What followed was a brutal exchange that continued into the gathering darkness. The attackers pressed forward relentlessly despite their losses, their military training evident in their disciplined advance. Samuel and Rebecca moved between defensive positions, bolstering weak points in their perimeter as the enemy probed for openings. Just as twilight deepened into true night, the attack from the east finally materialized. Riker and his men had navigated the difficult terrain and now threatened to encircle the defenders. Samuel ordered the prepared charges detonated, and the remaining outbuildings exploded in flames, temporarily illuminating the battlefield and denying the attackers their intended cover. In the chaos that followed, Rebecca spotted Riker himself attempting to flank the main house. With deadly precision, she put a bullet through his shoulder, the same shoulder that had taken the Shoshone arrow earlier. The gunman staggered but didn't fall, retreating into the shadows with a look of pure hatred directed at the house. As midnight approached, the attackers withdrew to regroup, leaving 7 of their number dead on the blood-soaked ground of the ranch yard. The defenders had suffered losses too. One of Samuel's hands was dead, another badly wounded, and 3 of Grey Wolf's warriors had fallen. "They'll come again at dawn," Rebecca said, as they tended to the wounded in the relative safety of the stone house. Samuel nodded grimly. "With fire, most likely. They'll try to smoke us out." The night passed in tense vigilance, but the expected dawn attack never materialized. Instead, as the first light broke over the eastern ridge, they were greeted by an unexpected sight, a column of dust approaching from the north. "Riders coming," Turner reported. "At least 20, moving fast." Samuel raised his field glasses, then lowered them with a surprised laugh. "It's the territorial marshal, Matheson, and he's brought the cavalry with him." What happened next unfolded with surprising swiftness. Caught between the defenders and the approaching lawmen, most of the attackers surrendered without further bloodshed. Riker and a few diehards attempted to escape through the canyon, but were intercepted by Shoshone scouts and a cavalry detachment. Marshal Matheson, a grizzled veteran of frontier law enforcement, greeted Samuel with a firm handshake. "Got a telegraph from Sheriff Cooper in Copper Creek. Seems he had a change of heart about certain arrangements with Mr. Blackwood. Confessed everything." Rebecca stepped forward, producing the documents she had taken from Blackwood's office. "These should complete the picture, Marshal. Names, dates, financial records, everything needed to dismantle Blackwood's operation and prosecute those involved." 3 days later, as the last of the cavalry departed with their prisoners, Samuel stood on his porch, watching the sunset paint the newly quiet valley in gold and crimson. Rebecca joined him, dressed once again in her own clothes, though she had exchanged her eastern finery for more practical frontier attire. "Marshal Matheson says Blackwood will hang," she said quietly. "Justice for Margaret, at last." Samuel nodded. And for the Thompsons, and all the others who crossed his path, he turned to face her. "What will you do now? Return east?" Rebecca looked out over the valley, her expression thoughtful. "I've been running for a long time, Mr. Hayworth, chasing vengeance, hiding behind false names. Perhaps it's time to stop running." Samuel considered her words carefully before speaking. "This valley has a way of healing old wounds. There's room here for someone looking to start again." He gestured to the burned remains of the barn. "I meant what I said about rebuilding. Could use a partner with your grit." Rebecca smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face and revealed the woman beneath the years of pursuit and pain. "Are you proposing a business arrangement, Mr. Hayworth?" "For now," he replied with a rare smile of his own. "Though I've learned lately that arrangements can change in unexpected ways." She considered this for a moment, then removed her mother's brooch from her pocket, the same one she had taken off in the saloon when they first met. "Let me take it off," she said softly, unfastening the clasp and placing the jewelry in his weathered palm. "A token of good faith for our new partnership." As the sun's final rays disappeared behind the western mountains, Samuel Hayworth looked down at the small piece of silver in his hand. Not just a brooch, but a symbol of trust from a woman who had forgotten how to trust. And in that moment, something fundamental changed in the heart of the weathered rancher who had spent too many years alone with his ghosts. "To new beginnings," he said simply, and together they turned toward the house and the future that awaited them in this harsh but beautiful corner of the Wyoming frontier. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.